Priyanka, I think you might be muted.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to the Joslin Park tree meeting. I'm Priyanka Venkina. I'm a project manager at Boston Parks and Recreation Department. I'm stepping in for Kathy Baker Eclipse, who had other commitments today. I'd like to thank you first for your participation in this meeting. We know that you all have busy schedules, and we really appreciate the time you are giving from your schedule to join us here tonight. At this time, I'd like to welcome any elected officials and staff who may be on the call, and ask that you raise your hand if you would like to say something. Okay, next slide. We did not receive any interpretation requests for this meeting, so we'll be continuing in English only. Next slide. I have a few items to go over before we start the presentation. Please know that this meeting is being recorded so that it can be posted to the project webpage. We will also be posting the notes and presentation slides to the website there as well. That should all be posted in about a week. We'll put the link for the project webpage in the chat in case you'd like to view this presentation again or share it with anyone who is unable to attend. Next slide. Your microphone will be muted, and it is up to you whether you would like to keep your video on. However, during the discussion session at the end, we encourage you to turn your video on if you are comfortable doing so. Please be respectful of everyone's ideas, feelings, and thoughts. All questions are welcome. We hope everyone will feel comfortable sharing their questions and comments either verbally or in the chat, but you are also welcome to reach out to Kathy directly via email if you would like to provide comments that way or discuss the project further, and we'll provide her email in the chat as well. Next slide. Just going over a few Zoom tips. As we go through the presentation, we ask that questions and comments are held until the end of the presentation. If it feels pressing, you're welcome to add questions or comments out to the chat throughout the course of the presentation, and we'll address those during the listening and discussion session. During that time, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love it if you would turn your videos on. To ask a question or provide a comment, if you're joining via Zoom on a computer, use the raise hand button and we will unmute you. If anyone is calling in on a phone, use *9 to raise your hand. Once we call on you, use *6 to unmute and mute again. Next slide. So now we're going to go, we're done with the housekeeping, and we're going to get started on the project overview. Next slide. We'll start with an introduction of the project team, and then look at an overview of the project, including the schedule. MBVA will then speak about the final concept plan for Joslin Park and its impacts on existing trees. Then the presentation will be followed by a listening and discussion session where we invite you to share your feedback, and then we'll discuss next steps. Next slide, please. Once again, I'm Priyanka Venkina, the project manager from Boston Parks. Tonight we have Jill Zick, the chief landscape architect at Boston Parks. Also on the team is Seth Reisman, deputy director of design review from Boston Planning. The designer and landscape architect for this project is Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. From MBVA, we have Chris and John tonight, who will be presenting the team's design work. Megan Bonner is your neighborhood contact from ONS, from Office of Neighborhood Services, and you are also welcome to reach out to him with any comments or questions. And finally, we have Michael McMillan, Parks Outreach Coordinator, who will be moderating the meeting tonight. Next, please. And with that, I'll pass it on to Jill to discuss the project schedule and funding.
Thanks, Priyanka. I'm Jill Zick, the interim chief landscape architect for the Boston Parks and Recreation Department. This is the 4th community meeting that's been held for the Joslin Park project. The project has already completed 3 design meetings, and tonight we'll discuss the impacts of the final concept design on the existing park trees. For those of you that might be new to the project, I want to provide some further context on how we came to be here tonight. Oh, sorry about that. The proposed new cancer hospital is a joint venture project between Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. In December of 2023, both institutions submitted updates to their 10-year institutional master plans, or IMPs, in which this project was identified as the only project proposed in those master plans. Throughout 2024, the Planning Department led a public review process, including multiple task force and public meetings. To promote design excellence, the project also went through review by the Boston Civic Design Commission, or BCDC, as part of this process. Additionally, multiple city departments reviewed the proposed projects for impacts, including traffic, parking, environment, and shadows. This informed the allowable building envelope for the proposed One Joslin Cancer Hospital and shaped the package of mitigation measures and community benefits. These review processes identified significant improvements to Joslin Park and adjacent streets as a part of an appropriate mitigation package. Key design principles were established focusing on safety, accessibility, multimodal circulation, and open space enhancement. Both master plans were approved by the BPDA board in October of 2024. Subsequently, in January of 2025, the hospital filed a large project review application for the specific building project at One Joslin Place. This triggered a detailed review of building design and the immediate public realm. The Planning Department again led a public process, including task force and public meetings, and the BCDC conducted another design review. Because the proposed improvements involve public land, both public streets and Joslin Park, approval from other departments and commissions is required. During design review with the Planning Department, both department staff and BCDC recognized the significant value of a comprehensive public realm redesign in this area. The BCDC took a rare step of issuing a letter of endorsement for the proposed design concept for the park, reading in part. During its review of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute institutional master plans, the commission advocated for a comprehensive reconsideration of Joslin Park and adjacent public rights-of-way, from the building face of the Rosenberg Building to the building face of the Joslin Diabetes Center. This guidance was intended to catalyze much-needed improvements to the only public-owned space in the Longwood Medical Area, which today functions as an expanded median between Joslin Place and Deaconess Road, rather than a truly meaningful public place. The project at One Joslin is uniquely positioned to deliver on this ambitious charge. The reconfiguration of the surrounding public rights-of-way and resulting changes to the configuration of Joslin Park will not only effectively increase the quantity of available space, but also improve its legibility and utility to the public, particularly by strengthening its presence along Brookline Avenue. The Commission acknowledges that this approach will be challenging, but it enthusiastically supports its implementation, convinced of its tremendous benefits to the public. Joslin Park, serving the many patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals who visit the Longwood Medical Area, should provide a space of healing, respite, and connection. It is a civic asset worthy of thoughtful investment and long-term stewardship. The project received BPDA board approval on June 12th of 2025. The Planning Department continues its work with the proponent on building and site design, and detailed design of the park continues to be led by the Parks Department through this public process. Next slide, please. The proposed development of the future cancer hospital on Joslin Place has presented us with a unique opportunity to renovate Joslin Park. There have been some interesting park issues that have come up through this lengthy design process, several of which we continue to explore to ensure the best possible park outcomes. It's very unusual for us to begin a design process in 1 year and talk about constructing it 5 years later, which is what you're seeing suggested in this timeline. But the timing of the park design is tied to the advancement of the hospital project. So it is important for us to gather and incorporate timely community input as a part of the overall process. Tonight's conversation will continue to inform the evolving design of the park, but the improvements will not be completed until about 2030, towards the end of the hospital's construction. It is also important to note that funding for the park improvement is coming from the Future Cancer Hospital project and not from the City of Boston Capital Improvement Fund. Next slide, please. With that, I'll hand it over to Chris Donahue from MVVA to speak about the park trees.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Priyanka. And hi, everyone. I'm Chris Donahue, principal at MVVA, the landscape architect, looking at this project as it relates to the Future Cancer Hospital. But really, really excited to be digging into Joslin Park proper, and what it means to look at the park and what could be a really fantastic public space for Boston, for the Longwood medical area. We look at every project really as the first step is looking at the existing conditions. How can the existing context, the existing urban fabric, and the existing tree canopy support a new, accessible, inclusive, beautiful public space within the city? And so looking today at opportunities to capitalize on existing tree canopy within Joslin Park and ways to reinvent the park, reinvigorate the vision for it around existing canopy, and looking at several opportunities to do so with your input. We began this process through some analyses that we presented as part of that public process that Jill spoke to a bit. Part of that analysis occurred in partnership with a licensed arborist in Massachusetts who went out and performed a sort of catalog of the existing trees. They documented the species, the size, the form, condition, any notable structural risk, whether, things that needed to be maintained or trees to be removed, things like that. And then also whether any of those trees would be likely candidates for transplant, meaning could we take that tree out of the ground, move it to a new location, and would it likely survive? And so of the 22 trees on site, they identified 9 trees as candidates for transplant. Those are shown here in yellow on this plan. All of them, they tend to be candidates because they're still of a smaller size, meaning they have a smaller root mass. It's more manageable to get in there with a large spade and dig those out as one contiguous root mass. That's the important part of moving a tree. There's lots of important parts, actually. But the most critical aspect is maintaining that soil mass, that root mass that's at the base of the tree, because that's really where where trees get all of their nutrients from, is that root mass in the ground. And so protecting that is an extremely important piece of the possibility for transplant. So the smaller they are, the more likely they are to transplant successfully. Again, as Jill mentioned, we've been in a unique opportunity with this project. It's tied to mitigation, but it feels like such an incredible opportunity, right? To rethink the public realm as part of a new cancer hospital that's so desperately needed in the city. How can the public realm around it also support health and wellness of the city's residents, right? And so a vision for a park, as we've been encouraged to study with BPDA, with the Parks Department, and various city agencies, that makes for a more inclusive, accessible, verdant public realm is really, really exciting to me, selfishly, as a landscape architect, but also just, I think, as a team looking at this and how this cancer hospital and the adjacent public realm can support a healthier city in the LMA and in the city more broadly. I mention this because it's a really important part of how we think about protecting existing trees, right? This is a massive undertaking to realign the roadways, to realign the park boundaries, to establish new grades and establish new accessible routes through and to a park. it's a lot of work and a lot of disturbance. And as I just said, disturbance around existing root mass is what causes, potential failure if you were to try to keep a tree in place, but you weren't really careful around its existing roots. So I mention this because it's just highlighting the complexity in some of this and why we're making some of the decisions that we are, and looking into the opportunities that we are with this process that I wanted to look at tonight with you all. The concept plan that we developed through that public process with the Parks Department and the community and BPDA and various city agencies, as I mentioned, is one of several garden rooms that negotiates quite a lot of grade change across a relatively small space. The space is about as long as a football field, so 100 yards or 300 feet, give or take, but it's about a third as wide. If any of you were on previous meetings, you would have seen a diagram that we showed, but the proportions and scale of this site. It's trying to get, across 10 feet of vertical change from the sort of left side of the plan over here, down almost 10 feet lower on the right side along Brookline Ave. And then between Joslin Place and Deaconess Road, it's also negotiating somewhere between 4.5 and 2.5 feet, from one side of the plan to the other. All of that really important to consider when thinking about moving trees around or trying to maintain trees in their current situation, but moving a lot of the pieces of the park around them. Um, so we went through this initial exercise of mapping existing trees over that concept plan that we developed, and developed, a list of basically, we started to eliminate trees. Honestly, it was our first step of looking at what trees are simply not candidates for survival or for retention within this totally reorganized urban realm. Um, we looked specifically at the City of Boston's Critical Root Zone, or CRZ, which is defined as 12 inches of a 12-inch radius, for each 1 inch of diameter in the trees, at or DBH, or the diameter at breast height, 4.5 feet off the ground. So, for example, a 9 foot or a 9-inch tree, so something, about that in diameter, will have a 9 foot radius of a critical root zone, or 18-foot diameter. So these circles, these sort of pinkish purplish circles, this is a very colorful diagram. I apologize to anyone with difficulty in color. But those pink circles represent the critical root zone, right? And so we went through and we started to analyze, critical root zones that are simply too large, marked in orange. That's tree number 5, 16, and 17. Their critical root zones are extremely broad, capture almost the entire site, and would make it almost impossible to weave, or truly impossible to weave, new accessible pathways, new accessible garden rooms, new benches, anything new really would be very difficult to accomplish within their critical root zone. So they become very difficult to maintain, if not impossible. Those marked in pink, basically those on the left side of the plan, trees number 1, 2, 11, and 12. Those CRZs infringe on new accessible crosswalks. So across Joslin in this direction, across Deaconess in this direction, those are new crossings, new marked safe crossings, that are improvements upon, those that exist today, um, and trying to make the park again more accessible and therefore more inclusive to people with potential mobility aids. Especially in a medical community, there's a much higher probability of people with different, mobility aids and or issues or visual impairments, trying to make this really accessible within a community that really demands that, as they all do, but especially here where that population tends to be a bit higher. Um, in purple, the CRZ, these 4 trees here, 8, 20, 19, and 18, they're all basically in direct conflict with that new alignment of Joslin Place, where we're now sort of, cutting across, through the previous park boundary. So there will be a new road there. It's impossible to maintain those trees in their place. New road or new adjacent sidewalks. It's just a lot of disturbance to the subsoil and that root zone. And then just one tree, number 9, up here in blue. It's a tree that was marked by the arborist as having some existing structural damage. So just from a common sense perspective, if we're going to go through this exercise, and really reorganize the park or go through quite a lot of difficulty to maintain a tree, we want to make sure it's a tree that's worth saving, not one that has existing damage to it. Take a deep breath there for a second. The other thing I wanted to acknowledge here with our process and this park, extremely narrow space, as I said, but quite complex as far as an urban park goes. And part of it is because of how narrow it is. As I said, it's negotiating nearly 10 feet of grade change. You can't really change much about the existing topography under a tree that's been in place for any given amount of time. And so basically all the contours under an existing tree would need to remain as is. Um, Worth noting, this in orange, that's an existing below grade tunnel that we've spoken about previously. There will have to be some repairs to that tunnel, some moving of existing utilities along that tunnel, the top of that tunnel, to support this new park alignment. All of this part of that mitigation package. And then just noting the sort of mess of of existing utilities. This is very common in cities like Boston. There's quite a lot of complexity in the existing utility networks, especially true again in a medical community where they have quite a lot of demand for different resources in these very complex buildings as well. But just noting that there's a lot of existing complexity within a small site that all comes into how we think about what can be preserved, where opportunities for relocation versus preservation. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just very simply designing around trees in an open field. But it's something that we're very seriously, embarking on as the next phase of design as we move into more detailed efforts to develop the vision for the park. Um, and so we've identified several opportunities, opportunities that may work well together as more than one, but we've pulled them out to look at differently in the different issues or complexities that come with them. Um, Opportunity A, as we've noted, tree number 15 is a 9.5-inch DBH sugar maple. It's the largest tree by DBH standard that was still deemed possible to salvage based on the diagram that I showed a couple slides ago. It's also just from a qualitative aspect. Myself and others on our team at MVVA, having been on site together quite a lot. We've all noticed this tree and thought that if we had to save a particular tree, that would be a really good candidate just because of the quality of it as a specimen, and the canopy that it provides in the city. So looking very seriously at how we might reorganize the plan to allow for that tree to remain in place. This diagram shows sort of I'll go back a second. This shows where that tree sits in the sort of final vision that we developed through that concept design process. We're now going back and looking at how we might modify that vision to allow for retaining these trees. So, excuse me. In that same location, we'd have to maintain a plant bed around it rather than the paved garden room that we were suggesting in that particular location. So this dark green shape we've identified is sort of how that plant bed might be reorganized a bit to absorb the critical root zone of that tree so that it could remain at its current elevation in its current spot. We would simply, deconstruct areas of the park around it and then rebuild a new park around that tree so that it would remain in place. Um, the sort of net change there, it's approximately 750 square feet of change or modification to that sort of final vision plan that we identified. And that change can be read as, a net add in planting area. It's an additional 750 square feet in soft area within the park. An area that we think of as being, tree canopy, shrubs, perennials, things that are soft and beautiful on the ground plane. But it's also from the other end, as I said previously, the really key charge here, of course, is making a more verdant public space, but also making one that's much more accessible and inclusive and allows for gatherings and people of all, walks of life to come together in a place that offers some respite in the city. So there is a little bit of a loss in terms of the net accessible plaza space from what we has shown previously, if we were to maintain this tree. Does not discount it as an opportunity, certainly, but just trying to sort of check where we were previously and track all of that because it is a public process. We want to make sure that everyone is on board with all the decisions that we're making collectively. Opportunity B is looking at it from a different perspective. It's how we might capitalize on the opportunity to transplant trees, as I mentioned before, those trees we showed in yellow, all the relatively small ones. The nice thing about this scheme or this idea is that it starts to create the vision for the park that we eventually want to see in 2030, right? Um, this park currently is sort of a line of trees on either side. We see it as more of a miniature forest or pockets or corridors of miniature forests, patches of miniature forests in the city that have quite a lot of transparency to them, so you can see through and underneath them, but they provide a really robust and diverse urban canopy. So mix of different species all clumped very closely together. They create garden rooms, they create really nice density, places for, migratory birds to land, adds an entirely new quality to a public space in the city. So the idea of taking of those, I think there were 9 that they identified as candidates for transplants, taking 4 or 5 of them, lumping them together to start that idea of a miniature forest as a sign of sort of what's to come when this park is realized, is another really exciting opportunity that we're looking at folding in. And in this example of these 5 particular trees that we identified, it saves a total of 18 inches dBH amongst those 5 trees. So nearly double what that one uh, existing sugar maple would save if we were to retain that in its place. So I think also just really, really great to maintain that much canopy, even though it's moved from somewhere else on site, still within the boundary of that same park, and used to those same general conditions, right? Um, and then opportunity C is going back to a concept that maintains trees in their existing locations. Tree number 13 is a 6-inch dBH cherry tree down here. And then tree number 14 is a 6.5 dBH Katsura. Katsuras happen to be one of my favorites, so I would love to see, that tree or other versions of it in the park. They just have really beautiful structure and bark, and the leaves on them are also quite unique as well. We use lots of them as multi-stems in other landscapes of ours here in Boston and around. But anyway, that was a personal anecdote I wasn't planning on sharing, but it happens when we start to talk trees. Just looking at at that plan again, showing the sort of dashed yellow line shows our previously, sort of more or less approved, the sort of final concept vision for that we identified through that public process of the garden room and how that might be modified to save those 2 trees. We didn't calculate the net, add and loss of planted area um, versus accessible area. This one, I think, is a little bit more challenging in how it starts to close off this sort of north end of the park. You can't immediately enter a garden room the way that you could in a previous vision like this one. So I don't know that it's ideal, but we want to keep our options open as these opportunities develop and as we move through the design and start to encounter really the nitty-gritty things that we will start to discover as more of our engineering team jumps on board to talk through mechanical, electrical, how we deal with ventilating that tunnel below. All of these are pretty serious challenges that'll fold into a relatively small park footprint. So we want to keep our options open and look at all of these opportunities holistically and have some options as this thing develops. Excuse me. So then looking at a composite, this is a little bit it's a lot as a diagram, but I think good because it's showing the sort of diversity and how we're thinking about this. It's a mix of canopy trees, high canopy that are shown with a sort of white fill and a green stroke. Um, some more understories like some of those, maybe some red buds, other trees that really like shade. We think of these as being trees, or we know these will all be trees that are really keyed into harsh urban environments. So, the kinds of trees that can deal with a little bit of salt, that can deal with the wear and tear of the air quality in an urban environment, trees that can deal with the kind of shade that we see in this park currently. And so thinking about all those as we develop that palette, and we'll continue to develop as we move into further phases of design. The summary here, I'll go through sort of one by one. In option A, or opportunity A, as we were describing, preserving that existing sugar maple would be preserving 9.5 inches DBH of existing canopy in place. Option or opportunity B, if we were to save those 5 trees, move them from elsewhere in the park into starting that miniature forest, we'd be saving 18 inches DBH in total. This diagram suggests that both of those opportunities could happen, side by side. It's not necessarily one or the other, but trying to capitalize on all opportunities to preserve urban canopy where we can. And then again, showing, the approximately 54-inch DBH of planted canopy trees, a total of 153 DBH in understory trees, noted in the sort of darker green. This also, as I suggested in those other diagrams, and through the sort of radical transformation of this larger public realm, does require removal of 12 existing trees for a total DBH of 242.5 inches. We'd be planting a total of 207 DBH, transplanting 18 inches, and saving 9.5 inches. So quick math, it's nearly a wash, but that's literally at day one. But the idea here is that it becomes a place where these trees all live very happy, long lives in a really sustainable soil media that will also develop. We would provide the irrigation and the maintenance programs, so these are successful trees that grow to far exceed the existing DBH there currently. We've also included, before I pass it back to the parks team, just a quick catalog of all of the existing trees so we can look more closely at all the candidates for transplant. Handful of paperbark maples in there, other really nice small trees. There's an amelanchier in here somewhere that was a good tree as well. That Katsura up there on the number 14. And this number 15 would be that sugar maple that we would potentially preserve with option or opportunity A. All these very much on the table and will continue to develop, but just, wanted to present each and every tree as a candidate in whatever possible way it could be. I'll pass it back to you, Jill and Priyanka, to facilitate any questions or dialogue, but thank you all for your time again.
Great, thank you, Chris. We can now take questions and comments. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions. Yes, Cheryl, go ahead.
Hi, could you please tell me what the steps are to decide the final configuration, and whether there'll be any community involvement? Like, what happens? How do you decide which of those configurations to go, and how will you share that with the community?
Sure, I can start with the next steps on a design, and then Priyanka, maybe you can help to talk about next steps with the community. We will begin to dig into this plan, or a version of this plan, with our engineering team. We are just at the threshold now between concept and more detailed schematic design development, documentation phases, where all of the engineering will come on board in a more serious capacity, and we'll start to unpack all of those utility networks. And that's where the feasibility of some of these opportunities will really come into play. It will be priority one that we make these opportunities work as they are, as feasible as they may be. And then, excuse me, we will then document ways that there's also a structure or a strategy in place with the contracting team that will be part of the specifications will also be around what's required to protect these trees. So there will be parameters in place it's not just, okay, build the tree, build the park around that. There has to be protection in place around them through construction of the hospital, through construction of the park. And so we'll also be on site to help specify what those protective measures look like. In terms of how this is then shared, the sort of final vision when we get closer to detailed documentation, I don't know exactly what the Parks Department typical process is, but I would be happy to, share that final design again through a similar venue or however makes the most sense for parks.
Sure, yeah, we have a couple of options. This is ideally the last community engagement as the team goes into the design development of these drawings. This meeting is, we've had 3 meetings leading up to this, gone through the community process to get a final concept plan. And this meeting is really just talking about the trees. As Chris said, they will be going through then into design development and really massaging out exactly what can be saved. And it may be these trees. We may find out through design development. It could be something else that we can either post it on the website, the final plan, and if there is a huge design change, we could do a meeting like this, a community briefing, just to notify the community that these are the changes that have taken place since this last meeting. But most likely going forward, we will post it on the project page. And we have your emails from tonight for everyone that's joined and registered, and we can send out an email with that update.
Thank you. And it's brilliant work. It's mind-blowing. It's really nice.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Darren, did you have a question? I saw your hand raised up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. That was my mistake.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and giving your time to this meeting. Oh, Cheryl, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm new at this. I wanted to make a statement and I didn't know if I've never done this before. So I wanted to know if I was just waiting to be told when you can make a statement. Can I make a statement?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Just wanted to read a statement that I prepared. So good evening and thank you for letting me speak. My name is Cheryl McLeod, and I'm a resident of Boston, patient at Dana-Farber, and a community advocate. Although Boston is lucky to have so many institutions here providing cancer care, Dana-Farber only treats cancer. And when I received my diagnosis right before the pandemic, I chose Dana-Farber because it was only one of 2 institutions at the time doing more than one clinical trial in triple negative breast cancer, which is what I had. It's a very aggressive form of cancer. I mean, I was really afraid I was going to die because at one point during the standard protocols, I didn't respond to treatment. The prescribed treatment the tumor kept growing. So my Dana-Farber team's like, you just concentrate on getting well. And they were able to tap into the latest promising methods and came up with a customized treatment plan, and it saved my life. I'm here today to give testimony to that. So I think that this new facility with the proposal, including the proposal to improve Joslin Park, will go such a long way to give many more people the chance to survive, and it'll offer patients a beautiful space for healing when they receive care. The availability of an outdoor space for cancer patients will promote relaxation and reduce stress and enhance emotional well-being. They're all essential processes, essential parts of the healing process. But I just want to tell you personally that every time I enter Dana-Farber for care, we have this tightening in my chest. When I was going through cancer, I'm recovering from cancer. When I walk into that building, I can't help it. I have this flashback to the scariest time of my life. So having a space where I can sit, look up at the clouds, imagine the lives of people rushing by and wondering what they're doing, and just breathe for a moment is so important, and it's just as important as and for me, it's just as important to have a park as it is to have chemotherapy. And I just wanted to share that with you. This is all about giving cancer patients like me a future and a fighting chance by using every tool in the toolbook for their recovery and healing, and that includes having a park. And we want to work with people, and I'm here as a community advocate to make sure that things that happen that enhance the quality of life for patients and their families outside of a hospital setting are available. And I know Dana-Farber is committed to providing the very best care, and that's why I'm here today. And hopefully this new hospital and this improved outdoor space, that it's such an improvement, even on a graphic, will continue to help do so. So I wanted to let you know I support this plan as it provides a really great respite area for patients like me and families, and it will definitely be a significant improvement from right now. It's a place that we just sort of go around to look for parking. People will actually use that park. So I just wanted to share that and say thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing your story with us. The work these guys have done is so impactful. Thank you for your voice of support in this project. It goes a long way, having the community behind our backs as well. Thank you again. Jill, I don't know if you want to add anything else, Chris, but
No, I appreciate your support as well.
thank you.
It's an amazing project to be a part of.
For sure. Again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Please visit the project website for any project updates. We will have this presentation video and the slide presentation up on the website within about a week. Please share it with any neighbors, friends, colleagues, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone.